know if it all came off in one piece. So what we're learning from all of these camera views that we have installed is when this foam comes off and in what size, because obviously the smaller the size, the less hazard it is. So I've got about 5 things in the report from the teams. And remember, we have a team at the Kennedy Space Center, we have a team at the Marshall Space Flight Center, and we have a team at the Johnson Space Flight Center. All 3 teams are pouring through this immense amount of data, not only from the LO2 feed line camera that gives you those great pictures all the way through launch, but all of the ground cameras. They have been looking at all of this high-definition television footage that was shot earlier today. I hope we're going to release some of that because there's some really spectacular views showing the beauty and power of this launch system, but fortunately not showing much in the way of debris. So let me run down the list. Here's the list that we've got so far. At 4 minutes and 5 seconds, we saw an event of spray of foam debris, apparently foam debris, with multiple potential impacts to the orbiter's starboard side, potential impact to the belly tile area, potential single debris impacts in the wing glove area, multiple pieces of debris seen originating outboard of the LO2 feed line and falling aft. Debris possibly impacts the orbiter. No damage noted on any of the potential. The story is when you look at these things which occur, a little stream of dribbly stream, actually a couple little dribbly streams of foam particles coming off, clearly are small pieces, clearly come off with a low pop-off velocity. Clearly there's no air at that altitude, so there is no energy, so even if they do strike different places on the underside of the orbiter, there is no hazard. Okay? That was the first event at about 4 minutes and 5 seconds plus or minus 2 seconds. Then at 5 minutes and 28 seconds, which is another almost minute and a half later, event is a spray of debris first seen outboard of the LO2 feed line. Debris falls outboard and aft in front of the starboard wing. Debris possibly impacts the orbiter, no damage identified. Kind of same song, second verse. Third report is actually post or at the time we separate from the external tank at 8 minutes and 44 seconds. A single piece of what is suspected to be ice originating from the umbilical area, which is where the pipe makes up between the external tank and the orbiter, travels forward along the orbiter's fuselage and appears to impact the port bipod, the bipod in the front that connects the orbiter to the tank, and is deflected upwards toward the orbiter and impacts the fuselage near the side of the nose gear landing door. The debris appears to change direction, but no damage seen at the impact site. Again, I watched that video. The speed is slow, the energy is low, there's no damage to the tile where this apparently struck. We're going to get really good pictures of all the tile when we get close to the space station, and so those 3 are the impacts. The radar at 5 minutes and 40 seconds, which is just far enough away from that other event that was reported from the camera, did see a return, but there's no way of knowing whether that's correlated with any of this foam or a different issue, and we'll continue to look through the ground-based cameras and see if we get a correlation there. And finally, the last thing that I've got, we had one of the paper covers over the thrusters. We put the paper covers over the reaction control system thrusters to keep the rain out. This time we were a little worried because we were missing one of those covers. It came off after the storm last night, or night before last. We didn't have any rain last night. That's a really good thing. No water in that thruster. Today, those covers are supposed to come off by about 13 seconds into flight, if memory serves me well. We had one hang on to 16 seconds into flight. It appeared from my uneducated eye that perhaps the little parachute that's supposed to pull off early had become detached, and so it held on a little bit longer than it should have. Did not appear to strike anywhere on the orbiter, not near the windows or any of those places we're worried about, so that's a non-issue. And so the bottom line is we are looking at nets, nothing of any remote consequence. The reason I don't have any pictures for you is there's just nothing to look at here, folks. Of course, we will inspect the underside of the orbiter, the entire heat shield system, with our fine-tooth comb inspection systems, and prove that there is nothing that caused any damage. The thing that this does give us is it says a couple of things. Number one, we got a really good tank here. Looks like we got a really good performance from the tank. I will reserve final judgment on that until we get the ET umbilical well photos down and can parse over them in fine detail. But it is telling us a lot more about time of release and the fact that these come off in small particles, size of release. So both of those things bode very well for saying that we are reducing the risk and flying a safer and safer ascent profile. So that's the whole story, guys. I'm sorry there's not much there. There's nothing very visual to look at. Over the next couple of days, I'm sure we're going to release some of the HDTV stuff. And we took a lot of looking at birds flying around. We took a lot of looking at Tyvek covers coming off, the thrusters. And there just is not very much other than what us geeky engineers get excited about to look at. There are some really spectacular shots of the shock plumes as the vehicle goes supersonic, which will probably be on calendars or posters coming to the store near you sometime. Other than the aesthetics, there wasn't much to look at. There you are.
Okay. Thanks, Wayne. We'll take some questions here. I understand we also have a couple of questions at Johnson Space Center in Houston. Please, as usual, remember to state your name and affiliation, and we'll start out with Mark.
Mark Carreau from the Houston Chronicle. Are there any estimates at this point of mass or size that correlates to any of these? And I gather what you're saying at this point, you're really not alarmed by what you've seen, but you're going to withhold judgment until you go through the whole process.
Well, you know, not only am I not alarmed, I'm really at ease after looking through this video. Again, what we're mostly looking at here for these late time periods, greater than 4 or 5 minutes, you're getting past the area that the ground cameras can really see anything. We're relying on that LO2 feedline camera. You'll recall that camera's got a nice fisheye lens on it, so things are kind of distorted, and it is almost impossible to get a mass estimate of what you're seeing from that camera. We'll get our mass estimates from the ET umbilical well photo, where they take the precise photos as we separated, and the photo lab folks can put all their computer tools and compute, you know, whatever piece of foam is missing, and they will get us a fairly accurate mass estimate over the course of the next couple of 3 days.
Okay, John, you're right there. Oh, Seth, that's fine too.
Well, you can have it, Seth. If you're John Johnson, LA Times. Just out of curiosity, I mean, this is the second mission in a row when we've had foam fairly late, and it seemed to me that if it was going to come off, it would come off earlier when the wind velocity is higher. Why is it coming off so late? Do you know?
I'm glad you asked that question, John. We've talked about that a lot. It's got to do, we believe, with the heat soak back. You know, this foam gets very hot during ascent from the heating, and as time goes on, that heat, and we're only talking a few minutes, the heat soaks back into the material and gets down into the little voids. Now remember what foam is. It's mostly open space. There's a little bit of material around air bubbles, if you want to think about it. We call a defect in the foam where that open space is bigger than we want it to be, and there's maybe less structure to hold the foam together. But those little air pockets get warm down underneath, and because the temperature goes up, the gas pressure goes up, and that pops the foam off. That's the leading cause, and so later is better from everybody's standpoint.
Okay, Seth.
Seth Borenstein, Associated Press. Wayne, just because you don't have much of a historical window to compare this to, I guess, two flights, where does this fall on the two extremes that you saw at this point in 114 and 121, where in 121 you guys were searching for stuff and couldn't find anything? Is this as clean, cleaner, less clean?
Well, okay, I would really like to look at that ET umbilical photos data before we make any kind of judgment like that. But what we've seen certainly tends toward the clean side.
Okay. Jay, I think I saw your hand up next.
Jay Barbary with NBC. Wayne, at 48 seconds, it appears that there is a piece coming off the backside of the tank, moving away, not hitting the orbiter. And I believe that was about 23,000 feet, Mach 107, somewhere in there. Did you see that?
What I saw in about that time frame, and it may not be exactly what you're referring to, but what I saw is something that the imagery folks say they see fairly typically, thought to be a little piece of ice or baggie coming off the umbilical area or perhaps off the base heat shield. You know, it's interesting that the main engines that burn, 6,000 degree combustion on the inside, we do such a good job of cooling them that ice forms on the outside. And a little piece of ice or baggy debris that comes off and then flies into that plume of the engine, very hot exhaust, makes a huge flare. And so I did see one like that. Folks confirmed that it was probably ice, not anything off the external tank. And that was fairly typical, and they see that fairly often, and it's not considered to be a significant or even very notable event.
This is from the beach tractor camera.
That was from a ground-based camera. Yeah, that's what we were looking at, HD TV from a ground-based camera.
Okay. Back along the wall to Todd.
Yeah, Todd Halverson of Florida Today. I'm wondering, I'm kind of curious whether the radar you have picked up the same events that the cameras picked up, and what your thinking is now on the utility of the radar to help you out for going back to night launches.
Well, it's fairly early on. They're going to do a data fusion exercise over the next few days to try to correlate all the camera views, the radar, and we've got 3 radars, debris radars tracking the vehicle, and also the wing leading edge impact detection sensor to see if there's any correlation between any events on any of those sensors. And we'll tell you what we know when we know it there. Right now I don't have a correlation. I should always remind everybody, very early on, this whole photo review takes several days. They won't even get the film back until tomorrow. The film gives us the best resolution from the cameras. We have upgraded from standard television to HD TV, which is better, but it's still not as good as the film. So the whole team is going to spend the next 3 or 4 days going through this data. And it's important for future flights. Again, to ensure the safety of this flight, we do that thermal protection system inspection. So whether we were missed or grazed or had damage, we will know that at the end of a couple of 3 days. So,
Tarek.
Thank you. Tarek Malik with Space.com and Space News. Wayne, I was just curious, I guess, based on what you've seen from this quick look, are the releases that you're seeing pretty much the typical ones that you expect to see in any regular flight, and does it give you confidence that you won't have to insert an extra day in there for focused inspection?
well, as to focused inspection, we do that based on what we see on the flight day 2 and 3 inspections. And certainly I'm hopeful that we won't have any areas of interest to look at in a focused inspection, but it's a little early to make that call.
Okay. Let's see. Come around here to Tom.
Tom Costello with NBC. Does this give you some feeling of vindication that perhaps you may have gone a long way towards getting this problem licked with the foam, and would it give you more confidence to launch in the evening or at nighttime in December?
This certainly goes toward both of those. We have made a number of improvements in the application of foam at our manufacturing facility outside New Orleans, and we have some more design work in progress. And the fact that we're getting what appears to be good performance, and I will again suspend judgment until we get all the data in, but at this point appears to be good performance. That does make us feel pretty good that we can proceed to relieving the daylight launch requirement. As a matter of fact, I should tell you, we don't have a daylight launch requirement on the books for flights after this one. So it would be an imposition of us. If we saw something really untoward this time, we would go off and do that.
Elliot Kleinberg, Palm Beach Post. I just want to make sure I got this in order. 405 debris comes off the tank and then strikes the underside on the right side of the orbiter.
Right.
At 528 and 844, something comes off also and strikes the orbiter. In all cases, do we know whether it was foam or ice?
The last one, the 8-minute and 44-second one, we're suspecting that was ice. The earlier ones, the suspicion would be foam. And again, all of those occurred at such a low velocity with such a low energy that we suspect no damage was done, and certainly none was observed. So this is good news.
And up here to the front with Warren, and then we'll probably go to JSC and take our question from there.
Warren Leary, New York Times. There were some pictures shown about an hour ago of the external tank falling away from the taken by the crew. Have you guys had a chance to do a quick look at those, number one? And number two, on the way up, there seemed to be a lot of flexing of the LOX feed line, more than I think we'd seen before. It was a lot really jimmering along. Is that a concern that someone has seen that kind of flexing going on?
Well, you know, if you've watched the last couple of flights, I think we saw a very similar vibration or flexing in that line. So that is as expected, and it's as designed. And really, if you look at the attachment brackets that we've got that hold that big 17-inch diameter pipe on the outside of the tank, they're made for that kind of flexing and vibration to go on. So that's not outside the usual. The crew handheld came down just as I was leaving the photo lab. I think there is a little bit of disappointment that we're probably not going to be able to get a lot of data out of that. So it's really that digital photography from the ET umbilical well cameras that we're going to be looking forward. The thing you can say from those photography is there's nothing really big showing up. I'm not sure how much more you can say than that.
Okay. Turns out we have no questions from JSC, so back of the room, Bill?
CBS, just follow Warren's question real quick. I too thought the LOX line looked like it was doing a little more vibrating. Then I was wondering, did a high Q ascent, excuse me, would that by definition make the aerodynamic environment a little bit more intense?
Well, by definition, flying the higher dynamic pressure will make the aerodynamic condition more intense. I don't know if that translates directly to pipe vibration. I think it has more to do with pumping half a ton of fluid per second through that pipe than it probably does with the aerodynamic environment. I mean, that's, if you've ever been around a pumping station where you're pumping large quantities of fluid through a pipe, there's a lot of vibration going on, and a good engineering practice would take that into account when you design the facility and its attachments. So I'm not too worried about it.
Just for my own clarification, though, with the absence of a power ramp, though, even that wouldn't make any difference given the structural specifications anyway, I guess.
Yeah, the PAL ramp was there to protect principally the pressurization lines, the small pipes, and the cable tray, which you can just barely see along the edge of that picture. That 17-inch line was never protected by the PAL ramp. That's always been kind of hanging out there. So.
Seeing no further questions, we'll call this a briefing. I want to thank you all for coming, and we'll return you back to live coverage of the STS-115 mission from the Johnson Space Center in Houston.
Too bad there wasn't more to talk about, guys.
Thank you.
Canadarm, which will be used tomorrow to unberth the other robotic component on Atlantis, the orbiter boom sensor system, and use that boom and its sensor packages to inspect Atlantis's heat shield, looking closely at the reinforced carbon-carbon material that protects the wing leading edge and nose cap of the orbiter.
Atlantis, Houston, no response required. Air to ground 2 is now normalized.
Houston, ready for APU Flight Day 1 reconfigs if you're ready.
We're ready for that.